There we go, good morning. Hello. Hello and welcome. This video is going to be about grief. Today is the 25th of January 2019. It would have been my mum's 85th birthday, meaning that my mum died 4 years ago on 4th of February 2015. So I'm going to talk about grief really in this video. I'm not grieving as such, I suppose, but then a small part of me always will. Because, you know, the journey of grief is different for everybody, as we know. And you always get little pangs every now and then when you've lost somebody so close. I've lost a number of people in my life, especially somebody very, very close to me. When you lose a parent that you love, because I've lost my dad and who cares, you know, I couldn't care less. But when you lose a parent that you love, it's a different grief. I can tell you that much. It is totally different. I'm going to roll a fag while we chat and also have a Slurpee, so cheers. And I'll keep an eye on the time. Let's have a look. Okay. If this is going to be a long video, I will turn the camera off, then turn it back on in 15-20 minutes. Okay, yeah. So, grief. The dictionary term of grief is intense sorrow. Doesn't tell you a lot, does it? Grief is far more than intense sorrow, whatever the hell intense sorrow is. You know, we know the word intense, but what does sorrow really mean? Sorry. Sorry for what? Sorry for your loss, that's what people say. Oh, sorry for your loss. Doesn't mean a lot, does it, sorry? And sorrow means even less, I think, really. So the dictionary term, intense sorrow, it could be intense sorrow, and then go on to say a deep, heartfelt longing for somebody that you've lost, a pain that's physical, emotional, psychological, that nobody can heal apart from time. It could go on to say a lot, but it doesn't. So my grief, my grieving story, if you like, when my mum died, I was absolutely beside myself, obviously, because I loved her. Missed her terribly. I felt every emotion under the sun, from anger, bitterness. I was just so upset, so full of, every waking thought was my mum as well. I suppose I got annoyed with myself that every single thought was about my mum. Couldn't change my thoughts for a while. Relief. When somebody dies, particularly when they've had a life, you know, my mum was 81, very unwell at the end and all the rest of it. There is a sense of relief. We don't like to say there is, we don't like to talk about that, but there is. The sense of relief is that I suppose I was beating myself up in a way. I could not take my mum's pain away. My mum was absolutely beside herself with worry. It was awful, the last days of my mum's life, absolutely awful. It was like a nightmare, and that's what it was to me, it was a recurring nightmare. My mum was in turmoil in her mind, you know, to see her so helpless, so lost in a hospital bed, and all we could do is sit and watch. The family round just sitting and watching, you know. And my mum, bless her, she lost control of lots, but she couldn't even speak at the end. She could verbalise words, but there was no sound. And she was saying, "Help me, please help me." That's what she was saying at the end, without verbalise, you know, without the noise, the sound coming out. There was no energy left. Help me. I am so ill, help me, please help me. That's what she kept saying over and over again. And we just looked at her because we were helpless, you know. That is awful, and that was something that I carried around with me as well. The overriding thing with my grief about my mum, and I still remember this now, is that I kept wishing that somehow I could be 6 months on. I wish I didn't have to go through this. I wish in 6 months' time I could then start my life again. You know, like I would just close my life down and bang. Within 1 second I'd be 6 months on, better still a year. Wishing my life away, and I really was. That's ridiculous because you've got to live every single day. But every single day is suffering. It's awful. You know, for me, my grief was different to many of the family members, perhaps. I'm a Buddhist. I'm not a very good Buddhist, but I am a Buddhist, and I agree with a lot of Buddha's teachings. One of the teachings is about impermanence, which I totally agree. And impermanence obviously means that nothing, you know, everything's temporary, everything, you know, it doesn't matter what, you know. One day everything you ever bought in your life, or one day everybody you ever knew in your life, or one day everybody you ever loved in your life, they won't be here anymore. They won't be on this planet. Every word you ever said, every thought you ever had would just fade away, you know. So impermanence, you know, nothing is permanent. Nothing is here forever. Everything is temporary. And life is a cycle. Everything is a cycle. And you know, we know that anyway. Obviously, you know, you're born, you have a life, then you die. That's the same as a tree. That's the same as a building. That's the same as a plant, a flower, a bird. Even a cloud is formed and it grows and it's got this beautiful fluffy white life around it and this energy, and it just fades away eventually, you know. That's how things are. So impermanence, you know, it's important for me, important word really. What I'm against with grief is these so-called experts, these know-it-alls, and they talk about the 6 points or the 12 points of grief. So you follow this set guideline, and then you marvellously feel much better about yourself, you know. And they're all rubbish, you know, and there's books written on grief, and a lot of them are complete rubbish, you know. Number one, they're written on one person's point of view, much the same as this video is, I suppose, you know, although I do try and broaden my videos. And to tell you there's like a process of grief is not right. There's a program of 12 steps. It's not right. You know, step 1, you should be feeling this. Step 2 is anger. Step 3 is sorrow. Step 4 is longing. Step 5 is not. It is not like that. Grief is being on a boat in the ocean forevermore. And, you know, the first stages of grief, the waves are massive and they smash in and crash in. There's a storm and plenty of rain and you're rocking and rolling and, you know, you're feeling ill at the same time, and a huge 60-foot wave comes crashing on the boat, nearly turning you over. You can't hardly cope with it. You certainly can't drive through it or steer through it, sail through it, whatever it's called. You know, and then eventually it settles down a little bit, and then poof, a big wave will come, and then another big wave, and grief comes in waves, and it settles down, and it comes again, and it settles down. And then eventually you realise that you're on this boat and it's a beautiful calm sea, sunny day, peace, quiet. You listen, there's a couple of seagulls far away, no waves, there's just a little ripple every now and then, that's fine. And then suddenly out of nowhere this big old wave comes crashing over you. That is grief. That is grief. There was, grief is a journey that there's no rhyme or reason to it for anybody. It is totally different to everybody. An old friend of mine, a guy I used to work with many years ago, after 22 years of his mum dying, after 22 years, he suddenly experienced a huge amount of grief. A huge amount. And he couldn't understand it. He spoke to his wife and, he had time off work even. He just felt awful about himself, about life, and he was grieving and all the rest of it. And in the end he came to see me and he said what he was going through. So I said, well, what are you going through? What's happening now in your life? What's changed recently? And he said, nothing. I've been to the doctor a few times about my bloody back and about this. And he was diabetic, just been diagnosed. And I said, well, that's it, isn't it? What he's now doing is thinking about the end of his life. And it's brought all of those emotions and everything about his mum back into where he is in his life, And I said to him, at some points in life, and it's different for everybody, we reach the tipping scale, we go halfway, we've lived over half our life. So we've lived more years than we are going to live, or that we've got left. And he said, yeah, I think you're right. He said, I am not concerned, but I suppose I am thinking I've only got 20 summers left or whatever, bless him. So that's where his grief was suddenly coming from really, and perhaps he hadn't allowed himself to deal with it fully and correctly at the time, perhaps, because again, there's no way of dealing with grief apart from your way, and your way is the right way. I think of my mum quite a lot now. After 4 years, I do think of my mum quite a lot. I miss her, of course I miss her. I often think of the funny things she did or said or whatever. I suppose the most I think about my mum is in gratitude. I often do. I think of certain little holidays we had, or the things she bought me at Christmas. I was just thinking, even just last night actually, I was thinking about a certain thing that my mum bought me one Christmas. And it's funny, I bought exactly the same thing now. It's only a little torch, and it goes on a key ring. It's a little triangle torch, tiny little thing about the size of a coin or whatever. But my mum bought me a blue one Christmas, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I used to lay in bed and I would point the little torch in my hand, and I'd make these shapes, these animals and what have you, up on the ceiling. And I bought one just because it's a bit dark, just on the side here when I go out late at night with boats, and don't want to be falling over. So I bought one, 99p. And that reminded me of my mum, and I smiled, and I often just say thanks mum. That's not grief. That's my thinking about mum in a gratitude, blessed sort of a way. Now that's how I think of her now. Obviously, when she died in the first 3 months to 6 months, literally any thought of my mum would have brought tears to my eyes. And here we are now 4 years on, and obviously I've moved on, so the grief is lesser for me, easier to manage, more understandable, more acceptable. And there's a question that you can ask yourself, isn't there? Would you want your mum back, or your loved one, whoever's died, would you want that person back? How they were when they died? And my answer is no. I wouldn't want my mum back with all that suffering, all that pain, all that mental torment going on. I wouldn't want my mum to live another day. And that's where the relief comes in. The relief that I couldn't take my mum's pain away, but my mum now is no longer in pain. I couldn't take my mum's mental torment away. You know, she suffered a lot. I couldn't take her suffering away from her. But now she's not suffering. So that gives you a relief feeling. On a selfish level, I used to keep my phone on 24/7 just in case the worst happened to my mum. And of course the worst did happen to my mum. Now I don't need that phone on 24/7, and that is a relief. You know, I've no longer got my mum fixed firmly right at the very forefront of my mind, of concern, of worry. I don't have that now, you know. So grief is a journey, and it's a journey that only you can follow. And your way is the right way, as I've said. Cheers. That's lovely. Nice slurpy. Now, often when somebody dies, particularly a parent, they may be in hospital, in a hospice, at home if you're lucky, maybe. And there will come a time that you know the end is near and you can't help them. You can't take away any pain or worry or discomfort. You may not be able to communicate properly to that person. You know, and that person's got one foot in the grave, really, and it is time that they let go and you let go, and time to move on, again, impermanence, you know. It might sound cruel and harsh and horrible, but we do have to accept that that is it, you know. And it leaves you with longing, it leaves you with that sorrow and, the pain and everything else for a while, but it does eventually subside. It does get easier. You know, you will have these waves of grief every now and then. Bang, they might come crashing in. They might well do, and that is just part of your journey. That is just part of the way things are for you. You know, but it is a difficult thing to deal with, grief. I think it's so much, that's why it's difficult. You know, you long to see that person again. You miss deeply. You're full of all sorts of anger and bitterness and sorrow and longing, and I wish I would have done this or said this and whatever, you know. But what I can tell you is that there's two things. When a person leaves, there's two things that can never ever leave, and that is love. Because once you've been once you've been loved, you cannot be unloved, can you? The love that you shared between that person is here forever. Your love doesn't die, it doesn't fade away with that person. That person doesn't take that love with them. Okay, I've given you this love while I was here, now I'm off, I want it back. It doesn't happen. So love remains. And also the energy of the person remains. Once that person's been here, the people they've affected, they've walked this earth and breathed this air, they create their own energy. You've got energy, I've got energy, and that energy remains here. So energy of the person and the love of the person remains here, you know. And it may be difficult to appreciate that in the early days of grief, early months of grief, but eventually, you know, you will feel the energy of that person. You will feel the love of that person, and that will carry you through. It will. And then you're just left with, there is still a bit of a longing. I would like to chat to my old mum, for instance. I'd love to go and chat to her. I really would. You know, but I can't. That's the truth. That's fact. You know. So occasionally I can feel my mum's energy and I can feel my mum's love. And that's what I've got now for the rest of my life. I've no longer got my mum. I can't hold her hand. I can't talk to her. I can't hear her laugh anymore. All of that is awful and a shame. But it's also absolutely right and correct and proper. That is the nature of life, you know. Again, impermanence. My mum wasn't supposed to be on this planet forever. She wouldn't want to be, and nor do I. When I'm old, when I'm ill, I want to go. I don't want to suffer. Anyway, so if you are going through grief, it's your own grief. Follow your own path. And if you want to chat to me, or anybody else who's been through grief, you know, reach out. Just reach out. Just say, I need a chat. You know, nothing anybody does or says can make things better for you. Nothing. It is a journey that's a very, very, I don't know the word really. It's a journey of solitude, a journey of one. That's what it is. But you will find your way through. And it seems absolutely unbelievable for the first 6 months. But you do. When will these thoughts ever end? When will these tears ever end? When will this pain ever end? When will this longing ever end? Actually, it does. You know, to lesser or greater degrees, but it does. And you will get through. But if you ever want to chat to me, anybody, you can contact me loads of different ways. I hope that's helped somebody. And happy birthday to my old mum, who would have been 85 today. Bless her. Love you, mum. Thank you for listening. Take care and be well. Cheers. Ta then.